Thank you all for having me and being so welcoming. I have experience with the steps as required by group conscience through meetings like this and by a sponsor who came through meetings like this. And I really, I have to hit the okay. Okay, I'm Ronica, alcoholic. And I have experience with these steps. Okay, because I didn't hit the okay on the recording. So, I try not to think about before I'm going to speak because then I'm coming up with stuff and it sounds really, I don't know, it doesn't feel like it's from the heart. So during the reading, I was praying, and what came to me was way before I picked up alcohol, right? I had this fear of what other people thought about me, which would lead to always feeling like I needed to be right, because I needed to be right, not just because I needed to be right, but so that people would like me and that they would have a reason to like me. So that meant you can't show weakness, you can't admit your mistakes. And it was really, one side was the pride side because I always need to be right. And the other side was the fear that if I apologized or took responsibility for something, then I'm already not good enough that people don't like, I have to give them a reason to like me, right? So I'm not going to give anybody any ammunition to reject me or what, but this is my thinking. It's not, so with that mindset, it wasn't consciously, in the beginning of my, at the top of my, like I could think about it, but as I got into this work and did the 4-step, I started to see how the beliefs I had totally directed my behaviors, right? So with that, I carried that around for a long time. And also, some of the family members, admitting fault or making mistakes was, it was hurtful because I didn't get, a lot of times I didn't get the support or the understanding or the guidance that a young child or a young adult. So all these things, don't say anything, always be right. You need a reason for people to like you. So with that mindset, I start to grow up, and then I find alcohol, right? Took off that anxiety. Alcohol, didn't worry about what people thought. It was okay. I could be, and I was doing other substances too. So when it got to the point where it says in step 2, when you drink, you find that you can't stop, or you can't control the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. Once I started, I would white knuckle. I was working in a bar for a while. I would white knuckle it, right? And, be like this. But the minute I start, boom, and so when I got here, I needed an overhaul. So by doing the overhaul and writing that 4-step and reading that 5th step, I had this awakening in my spirit. So the self-seeking behaviors really showed me how I harmed people and who I needed to make amends. Because my self-seeking wasn't just, isolating and not talking about something, or just keeping it all to myself. There was the cold shoulder, there was the judgment, there was the whatever, stealing, whatever. So when I first walked into AA and I saw those steps on the wall, like we'd go to these meetings and stuff, and there'd be steps on the wall, and I'd see the 4-step and I'd like, no. 5, I'm not telling anybody about my stuff. And 9, to go back to people, because I have that old mindset. I can't give people any reason to reject me or not like me. So why would I go back about the past and tell them? So as I started to do this writing, and then when I was reading the 5th step, I had a lot of, I started to have forgiveness for other people and for myself. And I saw that my behaviors, although they are not acceptable and people didn't deserve them, I had a better understanding of why I did them. It wasn't because I was less than, or I was worthless. It was because I had an alcoholic mind. So when I finished reading my fifth step, my sponsor's direction, while I was reading my fifth step, my sponsor said, this is a suggestion if you want to do it or not. She said, bring a highlighter. And as you're reading your fifth step, anybody that you think or you owe amends to, just put a little mark. It's going to make it a little bit easier for you later when you got to go back and do your list. And there were a couple I'd be reading and going on. And I don't know how she knew, but my sponsor would go like, so what do you think about that one? And I'd be like, what? She goes, you might want to put a yellow mark, because she could tell, or she could see me marking them, but she also could tell with, I don't know, maybe my tone or whatever, that I was just like, yeah. So got to the eighth step, started making that list. I was living in Florida and she was in Massachusetts. While I was up there, I wanted to make some amends. So I met with her the next day, and I had a graveyard amends to make. I had an amends to my cousin. And, they say, don't go back to boyfriends and stuff like that. Most of the guys that I had dated at the time up there, I was in okay relations with. I wasn't trying to get back with them. They weren't trying to get back with me. And, most of them were in recovery too. So one of the amends I made to an old boyfriend, and I did some things that were totally wrong. And when he wasn't part of this big book step study process, he was going to AA. And when I made the amends to him, about talking about what I did that was wrong, and, and what he didn't deserve, and coming clean to stuff. Now, like it says here, and I did cheat on him, right? So it says here, if they don't know, do we tell them? So, I had a feeling that he didn't know, but I wasn't sure. So that's where I kind of pray and have come to the understanding that when I ask somebody, is there anything else that you want to talk about, or something that I didn't mention that is important to you, or whatever, then I can get the inkling. Because I don't need to go up to somebody and go, oh yeah, when we were in high school, I used to trash you all the time and make fun of you and laugh behind your back with the kids in the art club or something. That's hurtful. But if I ask them, typically I can get an inkling if there's something that they kind of want to talk about, or they come out and say, oh yeah. So I did that with him, and there was none of that, but we were really, it made our relationship better friends. And like that was 28 years ago. I can call him and say, hey, I need some help with something, and he would help me. And the same thing for me with him. I've helped his family a few times. So his sister, this is a good one, right? So his sister, when he and I broke up, there was something I was trying to drag her, something very personal, that I was trying to drag her in the middle of. So of course I run over to her house, because he's cheating on me. This is before I cheated on him. So, it's okay, I cheated on him afterwards, right? Because I'm crazy. But so I go over there and try to drag her into the middle of this, and she basically shuts me down, doesn't want to hear it, and doesn't want me to be around the family. And I was really close to her and the kids. So my sponsor's like, and I was writing at the time, and I was like, I need to talk to her. She goes, no, you don't. Keep writing. And so she said, if you want to send her a letter, because I felt like, we were like sisters. So I get no response when I finally sent the letter. Nothing. No response. Nothing. So she kept on saying to me, you got to leave them alone. If they don't want you around, you got to leave them alone. So every time I would come back to Massachusetts and I would be in Mansfield or Foxborough, I'm like going to Stop and Shop, and I'm looking, maybe she'll be here, and God, that's God's, didn't happen. Fast forward many years, I get this thing on Facebook by the woman that he cheated with me on. They had been married, and she's reaching out to me like, oh, he's been cheating on me, and I want to talk to you about what I did. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not having any of that. But on that Facebook page was one of her daughters. And I owed them amends too. But when they were children, I had no business going near them. Zero. Because that would have been total self-centered. And so I just said, hey, how are you doing? And hit me right back. And I was coming to town actually. And I said, I'm coming out of town. Would you like to go get something to eat or whatever? So the two daughters and the husband, we meet. Well, they're divorced now. And there was a bunch of crazy stuff that happened with the sister. So I make amends to them. And I didn't do it like, oh, your mother shut me out. It was just like, this is what I tried to do. Because I cannot roll people under the bus, regardless of what their part in is a situation. I got to focus on mine. And I cannot cause more damage by forcing an amends or using an amends to make myself feel better. So at the time that I was up there, the older mother, who at the time we didn't get along when I was dating her son, she was just whatever. Well, she's in this lawsuit, like this like small claims court thing that's going on. I don't know if I do it. So I had called the brother and we had had lunch together. He goes, oh yeah, I got to go with my mother tomorrow, whatever. So I call him. He goes, what are you doing right now? He goes, listen, we're down at the small claims court in mediation. Can you please come down here and help my mother? I'm like, yeah, all right. So I go down there. I now haven't made amends to the mother yet, right? I go down there and, I went to law school. I don't practice, but I know I did mediation and some other stuff. So I get in there and I sit down and I see what's going on. I ask the questions of the mediator, I ask the questions of the lawyer. I said, can I talk to Claire for a little while? So Jimmy and I sit down together and she looks at me and she goes, what do you think? And I said, well, I think this offer is pretty good. Looking at everything and what you're going to get. She goes, so you think I should take it? I said, well, I think it's pretty good. She's like, okay, we'll take it, right? So Jimmy's looking at me, he's like, I can't believe you got her to take, because this is going on for hours with her, right? Nickel and diming them. So she takes it. I go over to the house that night just to, and she's got all these creditors calling her. She's got all financial problems. I get on the phone, I call the creditors and I'm like, so I try to make amends to her and she's like, oh no, dear, you're fine. No, older people, sometimes they're like, oh no. Well, I said, well, the way I treated you, I wasn't nice to you and it's fine. And meanwhile, she hates his the wife that's getting divorced, right? So now I'm the angel because I'm doing all this stuff for her. But I get on the phone, I call the creditors and I tell them they cannot contact her by phone calls anymore, that they have to do it by mail, right? Get all that stuff off the plate. And I took care of one or two of the creditors. And she was just like, thank you so much. So that was kind of a living amends that I could make to her and the family to help their mother and to make things a little bit better, all because I didn't try to force myself upon the family, like, hey, you're going to listen to me now because I want to hear it. I need to feel better. And then I ended up getting to see the sister. And she had train wrecked her life. She was for some guy. She lost all her money. She moved down to Florida. This guy took advantage of her. He was a big scammer. She had been a powerful real estate agent. When she came back to Massachusetts, she was out of real estate. She was working at some bars as assistant manager, and she was so depleted. So we had lunch together. We made amends. I told her how much I was wrong for trying to drag her, and she started bawling and she's like, I've missed you so much. And I said, why don't you go back into real estate? I don't think I can. And I'm like, you are great at real estate. So about 2 months later, I get a postcard from her with her new real estate broker. And she said, thanks for you. Without you, I wouldn't have done it. I'm not this great person because I'm just like the end all walk on water, right? But because I did this work, I'm not taking things personal like I did. Occasionally I still do, but I saw that how I reacted wasn't really personal about anybody. It was because I was in fear, because I was selfish, because I had to try to fix everything so that I would feel okay. And I saw that a lot of the actions that came towards me were similar by other people. They really weren't towards me. And I had a lot of compassion for people who were sick people too, and acted out in ways. So that allowed me to go make these amends. And listen, I pray every time and I'm still uncomfortable. And I've got a few that are, I've gone looking for people. And the last one I'm going to share is a financial amends. Lucky used to say, it's not your money they want, it's their money they want back. So this is a really old amends. Like, I just sent him the cash. All right. So I've been holding on to this. And so it was a good chunk of change. All right. So I worked for this ticket broker up in New Hampshire, and we had a falling out. And I had a bunch of Bruins tickets that he had put season tickets in my name. So instead of that season giving him the tickets that he paid for, I sold them to another ticket broker, right? Because I'm justified to get that money because he screwed me over, because it was not a good situation. But so I keep this. I know I owe him amends, not just for the money, but some of the behavior that I ran a few tickets to the office that, he didn't get any part of, there's somebody else's tickets. So I lose touch with him, right? Then it's on Facebook, and it's like the Telltale Heart, that the Edgar Allan Poe book about the guy that killed somebody and buried him in the basement, but he could still hear the heart. Right? That was my Telltale Heart. So every time I thought about, I need to do this, I didn't have the money, right? Because of course I got financial fear that I'm always going to be broke and I'm going to end up homeless and dying in some, homeless shelter or something, right? Which is crazy, but. And then when I did have the money, I never thought about him. Gee, imagine that. So every time I would come to a 8th and 9th step meeting, I would cringe, right? And when someone asked me to share, I'd cringe because I'm feeling like the big phony baloney. So I was at last year, I was at a meeting, and I was like, and the last couple of years, I'm property rich and I'm cash poor. I'm in the money pit right now. So I'm like, I need to pay him. I need to pay him. And I got a lot of back and stack stuff that needs to be taken care of, right? So I was taking care of someone who had cancer, and she passed away recently, and she left me a little bit of something. Of course, I got all these plans I want to do with it, right? I'm like, nope, you need to send him the money. Well, maybe I can just send him half right now, or maybe I can work out a deal and just send him, a little bit every month. No, send him the money. So I track him down on Facebook. I send him, he hits me right back. Hey, how are you? I said, I'd really like to talk to you. I owe you some amends if you'd be willing to talk to me. Yeah, absolutely. So we set up a time, get on the phone. I tell him all the things I did, and I tell him about that money, right? And he's like, I didn't even think about that. I go, well, I owe it to you. He goes, and he'd gotten himself, I think, some big trouble with the IRS and other stuff. He goes, well, I could really use it because my daughter's getting married. I'm like, it's your money. So I get the address, I send him the check, right? And the minute I wrote that check and put it in I have not thought about, oh my God, that money, I could have paid this off, or I could have done this. It's gone. And I felt so better. And when he got it, he said, I got to talk to my accountant before I, whatever. I'm like, no problem. So I'm looking at so he finally cashed the check. And he made amends to me for some of the behaviors that he did, because he was also I didn't realize how much drugs he was doing at the time and how much drinking he was doing. I knew he was drinking a little bit, but I didn't know how much drugs he was doing. And he's in AA now too. So, whenever I do the right thing, because I'm very fearful, and usually part of the reason I don't want to do something is because of fear, be it of your opinion of me, coming off on cash, of someone rejecting me and me being alone or not loved. But every time, I pray about this, and it sits here, and I know when I owe an amends that I have not made an effort to try to do, and I was so grateful that he was receptive to talk to me. And it wasn't about, I would have gotten him the money anyway, even if he said, yeah, I don't really want to talk to you. I would have said, I owe you some money and I'd like to send it to you. But the fact that I can be human and take responsibility for all those mistakes and trust that God's going to take care of everything. It's not even trust. Like, I know it. I know everything's going to work out okay. I'm not going to end up homeless in some shelter on, having my deathbed, breathing, whatever. And if I did, I would be okay. But these fears I conjure up, they're worse than anything that really does happen. So I'm getting close to my 20-minute mark, and I timed myself, and I really appreciate it. But those 9-step promises, those feelings of uselessness and self-pity, they're not 100% gone, but they're mostly gone. And occasionally they come up when something else, I misbehave and I don't trust God and I act selfishly, because then the fears fueling the selfishness, right? And I have lost most interest in selfish things. Occasionally, I can get a little selfish, but I know it now, and I can back down. And when I make a mistake, that self-seeking will slip away. I am so glad that is one of the best ones that have slipped away, because I don't have to go back and make amends. I don't have to do 10-step amends, because I may think something. I don't need to make an amends because I'm thinking, oh, that guy's a jerk, right? As long as I'm not acting out and giving him attitude or doing something. So the self-seeking and my whole attitude and outlook upon life has changed, only because I was willing to do this work. Even though I don't want to work hard. I want all the rewards without working hard, but I was beaten into a state of reasonableness. I did this work, but mostly because the people in the meetings carried me while I was writing, because I would hear how I felt. Like they could communicate the feelings, the uselessness, the hating myself. And that's when I needed, not the war stories about how many drunks I got into and how many times I got arrested and, whatever, how many bar tabs I beat. So these meetings carried me when it was really hard to write or really hard to just communicate. So I continue to come to these meetings. I hope I will continue for the rest of my life. And if you're writing or you're new, please keep writing. And because we want to hear you too. That's it. Thanks.
Right on. Thank you, Ronica.